Hello everyone, hope everything's been good to you whenever and wherever you are. This video is something completely different from what I usually make, but this is something that I had on my mind for a while and I just said, why not at this point? Plus you get to see some truly top of the line Marvel Rivals gameplay in the background. What's not to love? I'm sure the title pops up all sorts of questions in your head. It honestly doesn't mind too. I question where and how to start on this topic. Well, to try and start, many things happened in my life and I've never planned for them. I've never given them the time or thought you'd usually expect to. I'm not saying this is the way you should do things, but bear with me. Contrary to what I just said, I tend to overthink and stress heavily about such decisions. Not necessarily in planning, but more like general panic mood. And it has never done me well to do so, as after the decision has been made and we are at the ramifications phase, I'm like, what the hell was wrong with me back then? Like, this ain't so complicated. Even if the event that occurred can be considered difficult or worse for my life, I still question how I could have dwelt so much on it after the fact. Let's consider this hypothetical scenario. Maybe you were planning on going on a trip abroad and had this perfect plan that had everything you'll be doing from visiting to eating to breathing down to the second. But when you're there, you find a restaurant that's too good you just eat at it multiple times. Or you find that one magnificent spot that connects with you and you stay around the whole day. Or you meet a cool person there and in the process completely disregard that meticulous plan you had developed to just hang out with them and follow what they recommend. What I'm trying to say is your expectations you set will never ever be met to be anywhere near a decent degree, whether for better or for worse, honestly. And I think there's freedom to be found in knowing and accepting that. It can be liberating. I'm saying this for me just as much for everyone else. You'll find that many of the decisions that led to something you are grateful for in your life are basically not really decisions in the first place. As the title states, they happen on a complete whim. I'll share some examples from my own life as far as I can remember, and maybe that can illustrate my point better, and it's honestly nice to reflect on past events. In high school in my country, you have what is called branches, which are like mini majors basically. They determine which university major you can actually choose after you finish high school. There's a mathematics focused one leading to majors like computer science and engineering, a science focused one leading to like med school, biology, chemistry and the like. There's a humanities focused one, for a lack of a better description, that leads to education, business, political science and more. So you choose this mini major the last year of high school, and I've spent the previous 2 years in my high school having my eyes set on the sciences one, and I guess having in my mind that I'm going to become a doctor or a scientist or something. And so when it came the time to choose by the end of the second year, I just chose sciences, going with the expected and all of that. I was then in summer break, all well and good. Just a few weeks before the third year started, schools announced that the deadline for changing your mini major is very soon. I don't know what triggered it back then, but I swear it was almost like it didn't even cross my mind. All of a sudden it hit me that this was an actual decision I'm partaking in. The next day, after discussing with my parents and evaluating all of this, I remember vividly I left home and walked all the way to the school, which was far away at the time as we were in the process of moving closer, in the extreme heat of the summer and the sun, and I went and all sweaty and changed it without a second thought. And to this day, I feel like that was the correct way to go about it, and it happened on a complete whim. It was a similar matter for university. I had already been accepted in one of the most renowned in my country, so I didn't give it any more thought. Then out of nowhere I get an email, one that I almost chose not to put on my high school grades website, mind you, so I wouldn't have even received that email if I didn't choose that. It was telling me that I got offered a scholarship to a university that's still being built, and that's literally opening this year for the first time ever. And you know what? I went for it. I left the safety of the previous one and took the riskier option that had the promise of novelty, among many other reasons. And regardless of the quality of that university, I would go to say in hindsight now that I would never regret this decision. The people I've met and the growth that I've had alone makes up for any cons that came with that decision. And you know what the cool thing about all of this is? It happened on a whim. Even last semester, and I'm a senior now, I was stressing the fuck out on one specific class that I took of game design. Because it is an unusual class, it wasn't part of my major, and it was far away among many more doubts. So I came this close to dropping it in favor of another more traditional class, but I didn't, and boy am I glad I didn't. Turns out this course that I decided to enroll in on a whim was probably my favorite class in university, and it wasn't for the content or the learning outcomes or many more reasons you could think of. It was mainly for just the people, how this class was designed, and how I've had people around me who shared the love of games as I do. I met them, had good conversations about them, talking about what makes them good. I loved that. Tell that to past me who spent 2 weeks tweaking about that decision. There's way more where this is coming from. Far more than I could ever hope to recall or count. The best friends that I had were made in an instant and unexpected interaction. Many of the bad habits that I've had, I stopped after a random, seemingly unrelated event. The great moments I treasure in my life were mostly results of a thoughtless decision. And I mean, we hear about this everywhere, don't we? In fact, it might be way more glorified in the media we consume. Couples that met in unexpected circumstances and clickbaity titles such as "I've quit my job to become a professional Vegeta cosplayer," or "I've done something completely normal to do, but this happened." We love the idea of the unexpected. It is cooler to us. It sounds more exciting and adventurous, but we don't realize that we have these very own moments in our lives, and thus we do not embrace them when they come by us as much as we should. And I bet as you're listening to me through this video, you're probably feeling this too, whether this is more of a realization or honestly just a reminder of something that you don't consider as much as you go through your everyday life, as I bet most of us are. You can probably think of instances of this phenomena throughout your life, and I would love to hear about them in the comments if you're willing to share, because I think that sharing these things, these philosophical concepts and ideas that float around in our heads, it is good for us, for all of us as a community or even as a society. Who knows, it might reach someone and spark an idea for them, or connect to a life event they had in a way that allows them to better understand it. I know that this has happened to me way too many times. Random videos on YouTube or a single sentence said by someone might affect me way deeper than I would ever imagine. Most of what I've been saying has had positive connotations all over it, meaning that it's tending towards the idea that events happening on a whim are inherently quote-unquote good. But I think it's not just limited to that. Just as easily could something challenging in your life pop up, or a suffering you'd go through, or an unfortunate loss could very well all come on a whim. I know that's a scary thought to think about. As I talk about this now, I feel reluctant to, but understanding this in my opinion is not something to be avoided. I would argue it will help you deal with them in the long run, or at least sympathize with other people who are going through some bad things in their life. Not to mention it can remind you to enjoy and exist within the time you have now. Dwelling over a future doesn't sound as enticing, with the prospect that it might be flipped on its head out of nowhere. So my advice to me first, and to all of you next: don't let things in your life eat your mental, bite and claw away at your being slowly. The change we strive for in our lives does not necessarily have to come from a place of motivation or the right circumstances or the new year or many other preconditions we mentally place on it. It literally can just happen. Things will happen, and believe you me, they will happen whether you have planned for them or not. And more likely than not, will be completely different than what we expect. We have to live with that and accept that. After all, we are just humans. We are not the ones with the plans for everything in this universe. And honestly, this is part of what makes life fun. Having these spontaneous. Yeah. I hope you've gotten at least some value out of my yapping. I wish all of you the best and hope to see you in the next video that definitely I'm working on. Wait, now that I mentioned video, oh my god, I think this video as well. This video also happened on a whim.